Kate Mulafalcha. Welcome to Irish Granny Helen. And today I should say welcome to all my subscribers. Welcome new subscribers. Welcome back returning subscribers. Be a subscriber. Push the little buttons and bells. I appreciate you guys paying attention to anything I have to say. It never ceases to amaze me. So today is one of my more entertaining, lighthearted, non-political recordings. And I want to talk about an actress that virtually nobody knows about because fewer than 20% of her films exist. There's only one full entire film of hers that exists. And in those days, I think it was 1920 she made it. It's a silent film. And in those days, they didn't last long, 20 minutes, half an hour at the most. And it's really sad because she was so good. I just love her. Okay, her name is Olive Thomas, and she's a very interesting person. Let's talk about Olive. She was born October 20th, 1894. Her name was Olive Duffy. She was born in Charleroi, Pennsylvania. Both of her parents were from Irish backgrounds. Her father was a steel worker, and he died in a terrible accident, not around the time of her birth. I don't have an exact bit of information here, I realize now looking at this, but he was in a work accident. However, there's conflicting information. Her birth certificate says one thing, so he must have died before she was born. That sounds about right. But then there's other information from the death record that says something different. So work accident as a steel worker, but then the other death certificate says that he died of pneumonia and was a bricklayer. Who knows? After his death, her family moved to McKees Rock, Pennsylvania, which is a small mill town. She and her two brothers lived with their grandparents because their mother worked in a factory and was gone all day, every day. Later, her mother married a guy called Harry Van Kirk, who was a railroad worker. They had a daughter named Harriet in 1914, but she died in a car accident in 1931. So Olive really, as an adult, had no sister. She went to work at the age of 15. It just is incredible to read about these early film stars. So many of them didn't have a father, male and female. So many of them didn't have an education, and it wasn't that unusual at the time. I do these sessions with Deborah Lupien, and we ask, how common was that to not go to school, drop out of school at 13 or 14, like Barbara Stanwyck, and a lot of them later, maybe in the 30s and 40s, they got educated on the set. But these early actresses and actors had no education. Tough. I think Roscoe Arbuckle never went beyond, I think he was 5, and he dropped out of school, and his mother didn't know. She thought he was going to school, but he was not. He was working, which is mind-boggling. Anyway, Olive Thomas went to work at the age of 15. She sold gingham, that's that patterned fabric, at a department store for $2.75 a week, which today would have been about $92. She was poor. In 1911, when she was 17, she married a guy called Bernard Thomas. She clerked at a department store for 2 years, and they separated in 1913, and she moved to New York City. She lived with a relative in New York, and she worked in a Harlem department store. In 1914, she won the position of the most beautiful girl in New York City. It was a contest held by Howard Chandler Christie, who was a commercial artist. And if you see his paintings, they look a bit familiar. She became an artist's model, and she was on many, many, many magazine covers, including the Saturday Evening Post. I'll try to remember to put a picture up on my post. I'm not even going to pretend I know how to put it up here. And she just was really beautiful, really, really beautiful. An artist, Harrison Fisher, wrote that he recommended her to Florence Ziegfeld, the impresario. And she claimed that she just walked in herself and asked for a job. So, you know, it's hard to get information about these people. In 1915, June 21st, 1915, she made her stage debut in the Ziegfeld Follies. She got into more risque stuff, performance. He had a rooftop garden on the roof, outdoor garden, on the roof of the New Amsterdam Theater, one of the big Broadway theaters. I have been in it. I didn't know at the time it's haunted. I don't know. Anyway, they had this garden up above, and it was like a nightclub. And they had a special Ziegfeld Follies edition, R-rated, I guess, for rich men. And she was a part of that. It was very famous amongst the rich men, and they would become patrons. So I'm thinking like sugar daddy type situations. They'd give the girls money and expensive gifts. And the rumor was that she was very popular because she was quite attractive. And the German ambassador, Albrecht von Bernstorff, gave her a string of pearls worth $10,000 in those days. That kind of blows your mind. It's rumored she had an affair with Florence Ziegfeld. He was married. This is kind of an interesting little tidbit that I had forgotten. I've thought about it before and kind of went in one ear, out the other. He was married to the actress Billie Burke. You may know her better as the original Glinda the Good Witch in the original Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland. So she was married. She was a long-suffering wife, I think, of Florence Ziegfeld. They split up. And he had an affair with Olive. He had an affair with Marilyn Miller. And then he eventually ended up, she went her own way. Remember the name Marilyn Miller. We'll go back to her. She quit dealing with him because he wouldn't marry her. He wouldn't leave Billie Burke for Olive, so she left him. She modeled while she was in the Follies. She modeled for a guy. Well, she did all the magazine models, but better known, she modeled for Alberto Vargas. The Vargas girls are famous. If you see a picture of the Vargas girls, you'll go, oh, right, I recognize that. And I do have a picture of her as a Vargas girl. I'm a little concerned it might be too risque for YouTube. Let me look at it again. Well, it is kind of risque. But I think I can hide the risque part. Hang on. I'll just pull out one of my Lenormand cards. Come in handy. And this is going to be a challenge. Okay, hang on a second. This might look familiar to you. There's not a whole lot down below. But that's style. Very stylized 1920s, you know. Rudolph Valentino-ish type artwork. So she was his favorite model. He absolutely loved her. And he was the artist in residence for the Follies. Ziegfeld paid him to just paint the girls. And he painted her from memory, from a photograph and from memory after her death, and named it in memory of Olive Thomas, the Lotus Eater. And it's now in a private collection from 1986. Somebody bought it. And he called her the most beautiful brunette that Ziegfeld ever glorified. In 1916, she signed with International Film Company. And her first on-screen episode was episode number 10 of the Beatrice Fairfax serial. In those days, they did what they called cliffhangers. And so you would go to a movie theater and you'd watch a film, and it would be short to begin with, but they had serials where the story continued week after week, and it would end at a moment of suspense, literally suspense, somebody hanging off a bridge or a car teetering on a cliff. The Perils of Pauline was one of those series. Beatrix Fairfax serial was one of them, and Olive Thomas got her big start in it. It was shot in Ithaca, New York, and keep in mind that this early on, most films were made back east. They hadn't moved yet to California. But she made her full-length debut in 1917 in the Paramount movie, A Girl Like That. And she signed with Triangle Pictures. Around this time, the news broke that she was engaged to Jack Pickford. Now, the truth is, they'd already been married for a year. But she wanted to keep it a secret because she didn't want people claiming after the fact, you got your start because you were related to Mary Pickford, and so she pulled strings, and it was nepotism. Now, Mary Pickford was, without a doubt, the most famous silent film star. And she always played these roles where she acted like a little girl. She'd wear little girl dresses and little ringlets. And I don't know, I never saw the appeal, actually. I thought Olive Thomas was much better actress, but there's so little of her work left. Mary Pickford is even more dated. You know, Olive Thomas is right there at the start of the Roaring Twenties, and Mary Pickford is really back in the very beginning of silent films. But she was a very astute businesswoman. She was married to Douglas Fairbanks, and she and he and Charlie Chaplin and D.W. Griffith started United Artists. And they were independent. They never got sucked into the studios. They were their own producers in studio. And she made a fortune for herself. She was a very astute businesswoman. She had a brother, Jack. And Jack Pickford was a rake. He was the definition of a rake. He was a ne'er-do-well. He was a handsome devil. He liked the girls. He liked the alcohol. He liked the party accessories. He was kind of a Gatsby-esque type of figure, except he made no money of his own. He was just party 24/7. And he and Olive were really a beautiful couple, a very attractive couple. And they were the toast of everywhere they went. And they were just considered so romantic and so wonderful. So they've been married. She wanted to avoid nepotism. In June of 1917, she made her first film for the Triangle Pictures that she just signed for, Madcap Madge. And it was extremely popular. She made several films. In 1919, she made a film called Toton the Apache, where she posed as a boy. And she actually told people, this is the first real thing I've ever done as far as like acting. This is the first role where I actually acted. In December of 1918, she left Triangle Films for signed on with Selznick and was getting $2,500 a week. She was classified as one of the baby vamps. Now, vamp is short for vampire, and vampire, it was a term, the vamps was a term given to women who were not young and blonde and cute and saccharinely sweet and innocent. They tended to be more sultry, often, you know, very coded. They would be brunettes and not blondes, and they would be more exotic. They'd look vaguely Latin, or they would have, Theta Bera was one. They were just sort of a little bit older, a little worldly wise, seducers, those kind of roles. And she was a baby vamp. In other words, she was still young and had that little tinge of, youthful innocence about her, and maybe not quite as jaded and knowledgeable, but well on her road. She made several films as a baby vamp, and then the big hit in 1920. She starred in the movie The Flapper, and she plays the lead. And it's the only movie of hers that still exists, all the whole thing beginning to end. And it's not even completely intact. There are some sections where they piece together stills to fill in the gaps. She plays a schoolgirl who falls in love with this. And this is the most disturbing thing about the 1920s, the silent film era. It's a reflection of the social mores of the time. And it's incredibly common, not at all unusual, and nobody blinked an eye. All these really young girls being seduced and married to, or married by their families, arranged to marry older businessmen, older politicians. I find it noticeable and disturbing. So I don't know. Let me know what you think. But she falls in love with this guy in the neighborhood. She's in a girls' school, and she's just really, and she tries to act older. I don't think he realizes at first that she's still in school. And she tries to act, 17, not 16. So Frances Marion, who I want to talk about at some point here. Not today, but soon. Frances Marion was one of the women in Hollywood who made it big as a screenwriter and, behind the camera, not as well known perhaps, but she knew everybody and she liked to talk, and she coined the term flapper. She was the one who came up with it and put it into the vernacular, writing about films. And this was one of Olive's most successful films. I would say it's her only successful film that lasted, that it still exists. One of the problems with film, it was made on film. Movies were made on this, I don't know exactly what the material was. You've seen old film strips, but it was highly inflammable. It catch fire at the drop of a hat. If it was winding and it got too static electricity and got too hot, it would burn. And it burned, it was really bad. It would cause massive fires. It was dangerous to be a projector operator. And when they were stored, they weren't stored properly, and it degrades the material. It just clumps up, and it's so nobody valued these movies. They didn't realize they were historical documents, and they were just let deteriorate. It's so sad. So very wonderful people have gone out of their way in the past few decades to preserve them, find them, and save them. But so if anybody knows of anybody who has a copy of any old silent films, no matter how dismissive they feel about it, try to salvage them and send them to these people in Hollywood. It's not hard to find. You can Google it. It would be so wonderful to see more of them. Tiny fraction of the films made in the early era exist. Tiny fraction. So she was a huge hit in The Flapper. Now, she was not the original Flapper. I guess, let me reword that. She was the original Flapper, but she didn't get credit for it. Colleen Moore, who was a comedian, she did a movie where she was the Flapper. She gets the credit for being, the one everybody knows. But really, it started sooner with Olive Thomas. In 1920, October 4th, they released her last film called Everybody's Sweetheart. So let's look a little bit at her personal life. Her first husband, Bernard Thomas, he was a clerk. She stayed home, and then eventually she became a sales girl again. And in 1913, they separated, and she went to New York to model. That was her hope. She didn't go to New York to work in a department store. She went to model. In 1915, her divorce was final. She claimed desertion and something I can't read my handwriting. I wonder what it was. Desertion. In 1931, he said the real reason that they got divorced was of her ambition, her desire for luxury, and her desire to improve her station in life. But I'm not sure that you can really find fault for that. He wasn't interested, and she was really into the art. She was into like making something of herself. In 1916, she met Jack Pickford at a cafe on the Santa Monica Pier. Santa Monica Pier was a happening place back in those days. You can see some of it in the very first Mabel and Fatty Arbuckle, Roscoe. He didn't like being called Fatty. Roscoe Arbuckle and Mabel Normand were paired up against her will. And but she did it, because it's a long story. And they turned out to be the perfect comedic pair. And the first film they made was Fatty's Day Off. And they went to the Santa Monica Pier. And you can see for yourself, it's on YouTube for free. It's short. You can see how much fun it was. It was like a permanent carnival. They had rides and fun house and cotton candy and all that kind of stuff. But, you could get your fortune told, and they had places to eat. And it's where she met Jack Pickford, quite the dashing young fellow. They were both partiers. Now, this is what Frances Marion, the writer, had to say about her. She said they were innocent-looking children, gayest with the wildest brats. They were talented, but more interested in playing the roulette of life than in concentrating on their careers. They eloped in 1916. In 1920, they adopted her 6-year-old nephew after his mother died. So I don't know if it was her sister or her sister-in-law who died. It didn't say. She adopted this child, which must have been quite the shock because you heard they were party animals. They claimed certain things about their relationship, and there was always gossip. But Olive said that he was the love of her life, but their marriage was tumultuous. They were always fighting and making up, fighting and making up. They were very immature. They would give each other really expensive gifts to patch things up. Mary Pickford did not approve. They did not approve of her. Mary Pickford said that Olive belonged to an alien world, the world of comedy. But she is a legendary beauty. She did say that. She had the loveliest violet blue eyes. Ziegfeld never forgave Jack Pickford for taking her away from the Follies. And Mary Pickford said, I always thought of them as a couple of children playing together. So several people said that they were childlike. They were immature. They were the quintessential, lost generation. Let's not have any worries. And I think it's really important to remember it never, ever gets mentioned that this all came on the heels of a double blow. The Spanish flu and World War I. Traumas beyond traumas. Of course, young people reacted. They were both overworked. I mean, I don't know what he was overworked doing, but they were both overworked and their marriage went on the rocks. So they decided, let's take a vacation. So they decided to do a second honeymoon. And in August of 1920, they went to Paris. And a week or so after they got there, September 5th, 1920. They went out partying, and they were out till 3 o'clock in the morning. And they were staying at the Hotel Ritz because, of course, they were. And the story is that they were leaving the next day. And she wanted to pack. He didn't want to pack. He wanted to sleep. He was probably wasted. I mean, what can you say? So he went to sleep. And she was fussing around. That's how he actually described it. She was drunk and tired, and she accidentally took mercury bichloride. Now, this is a topical solution put on syphilitic sores. She thought it was either water or a sleeping tonic. It was in the dark. She was drunk. The label was in French. They were all in the bathroom together, these things, and the question was she confused? She drank it, and he was in bed. She drank it, and she's in the bathroom, and he heard her screaming, "Oh my God!" And he rushed in. She was taken to the hospital, and she died 5 days later. So rumors flew. Was this intentional on her part? On his part? An accident? What the heck happened? Did Jack give her syphilis? That was the other big question. Were they into party substances? You can't see them on YouTube. Party substances, orgies. What was going on? Did he trick her into drinking it to collect insurance money? So Owen Moore was a witness at the inquest. He'd been out with them that night, and he said they were fine. They were getting along. They were both happy. They weren't fighting. They were not despondent. I do think it's important to remember, and I'm not implying anything because I don't know, but I think it's important to remember that they were very intoxicated. People who are intoxicated can get into irrational confrontations about nothing at the drop of a hat. So it's important to remember that. But Jack said her death was a ghastly mistake. So here's his full story that he gave at the inquest. They were flying out the next day, and he said that he wanted to pack in the morning, and she wanted to pack that night. So he just went to bed. He said she was fussing around. You know, she wrote to her mother, and then she went into the bathroom, and he's trying to go to sleep. He could hear this. And then she shrieked, "Poison." He said there was a toilet solution. So I don't know what that meant. Toilet, like part of your, what's the word we use? Products, or was it some kind of cleaner? It was all in French. He got the hotel doctor who came in, and the hotel doctor got her to drink water, which if this thing is caustic going down, you should never try to bring it back up. I mean, I can't even believe this. But she said, "Oh my God, I'm poisoned." They then forced her to eat egg whites to coat her esophagus. The doctor pumped her stomach 3 times. At 9 a.m., they took her to the hospital. The doctor said she swallowed bichloride of mercury in alcohol, and it was a mistake. Jack says she remained conscious until the day she died. She didn't realize she was dying. They had a conversation about what she was going to do when she got out of the hospital, but she went into renal failure. And the doctor said that she fought harder than any patient they had ever had. She was kept alive the last 12 hours by shots. I don't know what they gave her. He asked her how she felt, Jack did. And she said, "Pretty weak, but I'll be all right in a little while. Don't worry, darling." And then an hour later, she died. All the stories of wild parties, he said, and cocaine and domestic fights were absolutely not true. There was a police investigation, an autopsy. She died from nephritis. That's problems with the kidneys because of the poisoning. But on September 13th, 1920, it was adjudicated an accident. They took her body back to New York for the funeral. Jack had to be talked out of jumping off the ship during the trip back home. He was beyond himself. Hundreds and hundreds of people came to this funeral. the family needed a police escort. She was interred in the crypt at Woodlawn Cemetery in Brooklyn. She didn't leave a will. Why would she? She was a child. Her estate was the equivalent of $430,000 today. This money got split between her mother, her brothers, and Jack, and he gave his share to her mother. I get the feeling this was a real relationship with them, immature but real. November 22nd of 1920, her possessions were auctioned off and $30,000 was made. Mabel Normand, remember I mentioned Mabel Normand as the comedian who worked with Roscoe Arbuckle. She bought a 20-piece toilet set. Now that would be comb and brush and nail file and powder puffs and all that stuff. And they were always in really beautiful containers. She bought that. She bought a 14-karat gold cigarette case and 3 pieces of jewelry. The press coverage of her death was the first real Hollywood media sensation. She was the first star, the way we think of total press coverage and crowds with police escorts and all that. And this was one of the major Hollywood scandals. You know, the Hollywood movie motion picture code thing all came about because of a string of scandals. And this was one of the first because of what they thought she swallowed. I mean, why did she do it? Roscoe Arbuckle was another one. And then there was the death of Thelma Todd and William Desmond Taylor, just one, after another. Anyway, today, this is so interesting. Her ghost is said to haunt the New Amsterdam Theater. In the old days, that's where she danced on the roof, and the risque garden top cafe that belonged, a nightclub, after hours nightclub that belonged to Ziegfeld. And I've told the story before, but I'll tell it briefly again. A guy was hired to work in the building at night when everybody else was gone. And the first night at work, he had been told, you'll be alone, you're fine. The next morning, the boss came in and said, how'd it go? How was your first night? And he said, well, you told me there would be nobody here. But at about whatever time, this woman came walking through the theater. She was on the opposite ends of the rows of seats. And I looked across the rows and she looked at me and she just waved, really friendly, and walked up onto the stage and went behind the curtain. And I don't know where she went. I didn't find her after that. And the boss said, oh, you've met Olive. So I don't know. Deborah and I are going to do this as a session with Deborah. We'll have to talk to Olive Thomas. So that's the story of one of my very favorite silent film actresses. And I'm going to venture a guess that probably 3 people are interested, but that's okay. Like my grandmother always said, there's no accounting for taste. Thank you very much for watching. Slán go fóill. Slánte.